Domino Theory with Christian White, and of course, always joined by Mark Simon. We're live today for the first time.
First
So,
time,
Mark,
that
say
should be
hello.
interesting. Career ending. Yes, go.
Always dangerous. Well, it's October 16th, just after the market closed. A little bit of turbulence today. The S&P was off a little more than half a point, 0.63% down. Not huge. Broader market index that isn't weighted. That isn't weighted average, but is equally weighted across the S&P 500, down 1%. And this is on turbulence over banks. There's worry that Zion and Western and the investment bank Jefferies might have made aggressive loans. And there's some echoes here of Silicon Valley Bank, which we're not allowed to say was bailed out. You get canceled, apparently, so it used to be. This was during the Biden administration. To say that a bank that got bailed out was bailed out, it was just something magical. It happened that M2 jumped up because the Federal Reserve did something. You know, my theory is that Silicon Valley Bank was bailed out because a bunch of Silicon Valley types who are well connected in the Biden administration
Yeah.
and Karens were worthy of being bailed out, but that might not be the case, and especially if it's three banks instead of one. I don't know. What do you think? This is just another blip amid the sort of concern and fear with the trade war, which we'll talk about later. Are you making a big deal out of this, Mark?
I'm not making too big of a deal out of it because I think it's okay when banks go kaput. I think it's basically a healthy thing that happens every once in a while. I think overall we are seeing sectors of the economy slow. We're seeing growth areas where, like, if you had 46 or 48% of the economy was actually growing, certain different sectors. Now we're down to below 25%. That's obviously some of the trade war. I mean, the tariffs coming in. Interest rates, I think, have not come down enough to do anything to impact us. And banks do make bad loans. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. Things happen. They go belly up. But I always take the view that it's better for it to happen. Take it out. We have a growing population. Most of these banks are basically, hopefully, in real estate in some ways or another, and they'll recover. But people are allowed to lose money. This is the one thing that's the biggest problem I have with our unfortunate business media, is that somehow if you lose money, it's the end of the world. What's going to ever happen? Hey, you lose money every once in a while, and I think that's healthy for the banks. Let's see what happens a few months from now. I mean, basically, if you go back 6 months on your little whatever at Yahoo, NBC, CNBC chart, and look, we were here, now we're here, a little bit back and forth, and we're at 45, 46,000. So the fact of the matter is, we're going to move 1,000 points a day. It's not that hard to do it.
Yeah, I think a little creative destruction is good, especially in finance. These people can hack it. It pisses me off when the federal government bails out accounts larger than 250K. I'm not sure not that I have a whole lot of those, but yeah, it just seems that the wrong people get bailed out. I don't know what Jerome Powell would be allowed to do, since actually Scott Bessent is Treasury Secretary now, but we'll see. Skipping ahead to losing money in media, we're going to cover this later, and I know we want to get to an H-1B story, which has been something you focused on a lot, the H-1B scam. But speaking of losing money, CBS News and Barry Weiss, who took over, I think, just 10 days ago, or at least was made the editor-in-chief, despite the fact, and I think this is good, despite the fact she has no broadcast experience. She's a print journalist, basically one of the few remaining, I'd say, honest classical liberals, or liberals, however you want to say it, brought in and put in charge of this organization that has just been sucking wind for so long. I mean, you think back to the 80s, early 90s, there was Peter Jennings, that was ABC, Tom Brokaw at NBC, and Dan Rather. And even though Dan Rather was increasingly an insufferable liberal and was caught lying during the Bush administration, still had some respect, some following. You could say, well, he sort of is an heir of sorts to Walter Cronkite and what's his name, Murrow, the other people at the Tiffany Network. And that, I don't know. So apparently today, Weiss pushed out a wokeista, one of the woke mobsters who was in charge of Claudia, is it Milna, in charge of standards and practices there. Is there anything left to save at CBS? I mean, sort of like when they tried to tack CNN a little towards the center. It's like the only people watching are loonies. Is there anything left?
First of all, this is a division that loses probably about $45 to $50 million a year. I know somebody pretty senior in the Paramount Group, and she's very clear this group has not made money for years, even with the gym of 60 Minutes. The fact that you still have a standards practice person is ridiculous. I could go through that thing, and I've run large media companies before, ones that make money. Yeah, I could go through that place tomorrow and take out 25 people, and nobody would know it the next day, and I'd probably save us with that 25 people $10 million a year. Look, these legacy media companies have been built and established on a time frame where basically they're still doing that stupid Jeff Daniels TV show. It's ridiculous that they even exist. That said, TV, you sent me a very good article the other day. TV is the medium that's going to survive. And whether it's streaming or something else, people are going to be watching that on, whether it's on a screen, but TV is the way forward. I think Barry Weiss has her work cut out for her. I'm actually very happy that she actually pulled the trigger. I think one of the things that they're underestimating with Barry Weiss is essentially you've got what I would call the candy asses who've been sitting there for years up in the Upper West Side. We all know where they are. You know what I'm saying?
Candy ass liberals. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Sitting up there, and all of a sudden you're bringing in this tough Jewish girl who basically was somewhat abused. I mean, Barry was treated very badly at the New York Times. I spoke with some actual journalists who worked there, and they said the tragedy of the real thing with Barry is that it wasn't the journalist that did it to her. It was all these production, other people around them. But like, you know, the guy who has the crime beat, or the person who's covering the political beat down in DC, or the foreign journalist in Berlin or Beijing, they don't really give a damn. You know what I'm saying? In other words, like, as long as they're getting their paycheck, that's for it. Here's the other thing that I will say about these companies, and I noticed this with the Stephanopoulos or whatever Trump.
Steffi Stephanopoulos, as Rush used to call him. Steffi.
You know, I mean,
and of course, we remember him as the guy who looked like he was about 15, dating myself here, on the 1992 Clinton campaign. I first saw him, I'm like, they must have like asked the question at 2 a.m. and gotten the night guy. This guy can't really be the, I don't know what he was, communications director or whatever.
Yeah.
And then a brief stint in the White House.
Here's the problem that you have with Stephanopoulos, and here's the problem that they have in a lot of these media companies with these older television journalists. Stephanopoulos, you hit it. He came from an upper middle class Greek family. He was at the White House. What was he making when he left the White House in the Clinton White House then? $110,000 a year back then.
That's where you tap out there.
Jumped into a job wherever he was, maybe jumped up to like 300 grand. Then jumped over to ABC News or whatever it was. So for the last 25 years, this guy's been making $8 or $9 million a year, or whatever it is. He's a wealthy man. He's wealthier beyond than he ever thought he would be. He's like best friends with Jerry Seinfeld. They live next door, or whatever it is. He lives in a different world. So the fact of the matter is, from a management perspective, you got no control over this guy. And that's your problem. And so the fact of the matter is, Barry Weiss's biggest problem going forward is she's got a lot of very highly paid people, some people with spouses who make a lot of money as well. They don't need the paycheck anymore, and they're going to fight on ideological grounds, which is really sad, because probably 3/4 of the people at CBS need those paychecks, and it's the best job they ever going to have. And once they leave, this is the other thing too that I don't understand. I've never seen anyone, with the exception of a few, leave a large network and make more money. Hey, Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson have a very successful.
And Barry, yeah.
Barry is the one exception. But I question whether Megyn and Tucker are making as much money net. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's a devoted audience, but it's a smaller audience. I pulled the numbers for a client. I mean, it's interesting because people are paying to hear him as opposed to just, running through primetime on Fox. But yeah, I mean, it's the Trump joke. Tucker needs a network.
What was Megyn Kelly making? $12 million a year, and basically she'd drive in, she'd get in at noon after lunch. You know what I'm saying? She'd get in after lunch, or she'd come in before. Then she'd do her show, come in after lunch, prepare, do her show, and then walk away at whatever time it was, 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, whatever time. go home, go out and have a drink, go see the kids, whatever. Now she's basically getting up at 7 in the morning, talking to advertisers, doing this, doing that. And I promise you it's not for that much money because I know a little bit about their economics. But that's fine. That's okay. And I think that's fine. But that's the issue. I think Barry Weiss is up against it. She's up against a Leviathan there.
Yeah.
To me, my suggestion would be and I don't know Barry well. I've only met her once or twice. If she ever needs somebody to go in there on a suicide mission, I'll put on the bonsai. I'll go in. I'm willing to be hated. I'm willing to be hated and then paid out when I leave. And I can promise you, I can do it all part-time.
All right. Well, you did this in getting kicked out of Hong Kong, so you might get kicked out of Manhattan. But
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. But it is. I wish her the best of luck. And I will tell you this. I think what will happen is other companies are watching her, and if they can get it back together again, she can make money. That's the most important thing. They can make some money.
Yeah, God forbid a company should try and do that. And all these news divisions seems to be drags on the networks, and they're dragging down their reputation. Otherwise, I mean, there's a real question whether you could just do reruns of, I forget, what is the CBS property? Is it The Young and the Restless, or is it,
Well, the
other one? Yeah.
I'll let it go this round, Tim. I used to try to pitch Bill Shine at Fox all the time, a late night show, some type of animation news, all this stuff. He had one response from me all the time: Mark, when you can beat Free, then call me, because they were rerunning O'Reilly at 11 o'clock, and they were still doing over 1.2 million, 1.3 million. They may make 1 million, 1.3 million viewers. They finally came up with something that was beating, and that was Gutfeld, which they wisely moved to 10 o'clock.
Yeah, that's right. We probably should have started this first live episode with Bill O'Reilly's, homage to "We'll do it live. We'll do it live." I'll throw a link in the description if you don't know what I'm talking about, but it's pretty funny. Trust me on that. All right, back up a little bit. So China, there's this on again, off again. It's not a trade war in the sense the war's been going on, I think, and I think they started it. Donald Trump just recognized it existed, but you had this truce. The Chinese broke the truce. They said, we're going to create this convoluted export restriction scheme on rare earths, which we know aren't that rare, but are in fact a little bit messy and difficult to produce, to refine, to mill, etc. Yeah. All right, and so then Trump comes and says, okay, well, screw you. I'm going to put 100% tariff on top of that, but delays it till November 1 to give them a little time to come to their senses. And also, we're going to create an export regimen over software, which the Chinese and the Taiwanese just aren't as good as. In fact, the U.S. definitively leads the world in software. So, and then there's some, harsh rhetoric from the Chinese, some harsh rhetoric from Trump, and then the markets react, and Trump backs off. Bessent in particular, and that does give me some relief that it does seem to be the U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer and Scott Bessent, the U.S. Secretary of Treasury, probably our best in modern time, in charge of this, as opposed to, say, the Commerce Department and some of the sloppy language, you've heard out of Lotnick over there. Anyway, but get this. So, we have some conciliatory language coming from Washington, and here goes from Wang Yi, sort of a grand poobah in the Chi-Com party over there. Should I use my Asian accent, or is that going to get us fired?
No, don't do the Asian accent.
All right, I'll just use the American one. Equality, respect, and the pursuit of mutual benefits are the correct ways for the two countries to deal with each other. Decoupling or severing of industrial and supply chains are not realistic or rational choices. And confrontation or antagonism will only lead to mutual loss. Of course, they are pros at all of those things, but it sounds like the Chinese are kind of blinking here. So the question is, do you think they are? But one other thing, too, is do you think the tech bros have screwed us here? I mean, we seem to have shifted from a place where we have all this power over China, because where else are they going to sell their cheap crap, to one where it's been clear to the world that we are not prepared to, we haven't stockpiled rare earths. We don't have enough for our military and for our car industry, the way the Japanese did when they were threatened by the Chinese in 2010. We apparently haven't done that. So I don't know. Do you think we've been screwed by the tech bros? And what do you think? Did China just blink?
First of all, China absolutely blinked. If you understand CCP talk, you know what I'm saying? If you understand that was
even without the accent, you understood.
I understand it. First of all, Wang Yi is a particularly prickly character. I've know some stories about him. Basically, he's very prickly. He did not look happy in there. I watched him. He's been very unhappy. They chose basically a limp rod in Steve Schwartzman to do it with, the guy from Black.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's right. Of course, he's over there. He's naturally just happens to be meeting with Wang Yi. All these finance and tech guys are just, still.
Yeah, I said, so they're going over there, and I said, and I think the problem that they have is my real belief is, look, the number one priority of the Chinese Communist Party in foreign policy is one thing: shut up. They just want Trump to shut up. They want the world to shut up. First of all, you're dealing with Donald Trump. He's not going to shut up. Secondly, and the most important thing to me, is they can't make social media shut up. And their problem is they don't know how to control this message in the world. I've been sensing in the last 4 or 5 weeks, the rare earth thing, their move didn't surprise me that much. And the reason why is it was kind of an odd thing of, they finally got around to it. They always have to have the last word. That's what people don't understand. They always have to have the last word. And Tiananmen Square, people forget that's the monumental moment. It was all settled. Everything was done. The students were going back. When Deng Xiaoping, and then when they sent the troops in, it was to basically said, we control this. We're in charge. You can leave, but you can't come back. The rare earth shot at Donald Trump was basically them telling Donald Trump, we are in charge. Therefore, we will determine this. Their problem was they misfired because Trump turned around and said, hey, stick it up yours where the sun doesn't shine. I'm going to have this fight. That was the mistake. Remember that. The reason why they do that is that's the nature of the Communist Party. We keep forgetting this all the time. God knows Schwartzman and those clowns and the tech bros don't understand it. They're still the guys that you meet going, oh, China's not communist. They're all capitalist.
That's right. They say so.
Look,
Yeah.
you're just a moron. Xi Jinping, these guys are communists. They run an evil empire. And that's what they're doing. But that's exactly what this is. This is them. When they did this, it didn't surprise me for that one reason. I was thinking they're not going to let Trump dictate this. Xi Jinping cannot be seen internally as backing down. That goes against everything in their world. So I expect when we saw Wang Yi do this, they won't, at home, nobody will see this. But what they're doing is you're going to see Trump basically probably take them up on their offer, and then we're going to see a slow walk in to APEC where a deal will be cut.
Right. Okay. Well, that would actually make APEC relevant. That'd be shocking.
It will make it. There's no way that Xi Jinping is going to go there and not see Donald Trump and not have a conversation.
What's the point? Yeah.
By the way,
hang out with them, Hun Sen or something.
Give Scott Bessent massive credit for attacking that one guy, Li Ching-chang or whatever, Ching-chang.
Yeah.
What a great attack. That was brilliant because they don't know how to handle that stuff. They don't know how to do it. That's why they're like, oh, I can't believe, he's a man of, when you see the defense of him, it literally is this elite Han superiority, like he's a man of letters, he's a man, they actually had a man of dignity and letters. How can you dare attack him? I said, actually, to me, he looks like one of those little characters on he looks like whatever that little character that elf was in Harry Potter, and he's a nasty piece of shit too, excuse my language. He really is. I mean, Ling Ling Wei from the Wall Street Journal actually did her job for the Chinese embassy and previewed, here he comes, Mr. Tough Guy. Well, apparently I have now heard, and I think it's a very good source, that essentially Scott Bessent was going to punch Elon Musk in the face. You know what I'm saying? You think he's going to take a bunch of crap from some little, not minion, but some little commie who essentially was quite insulting from what I understand. I understand to the point he was insulting enough to the point where like the Chinese in the room were uneasy about it. So Benson's like, all right, you're going to send this guy to do this bidding. Look, my point is, Scott Bessent, when this guy got up in his face, he didn't do the same thing that Jake Sullivan Blinken did in Alaska, where they're like, okay.
Yeah, that was
No,
terrible.
you
Or
can't do
Janet
that.
from Another Planet yelling, who what? She thought she did some mushrooms over there in China or something.
Yes.
Walking
I mean, look, again, it comes back to it. They're communist. They're
Yeah.
not good people. If they think they can get away with you on something, they'll do it. I also happen to believe firmly that Trump turning the tables on them on everything, like twisting stuff all the time, in their mind, he's breaking deals. I think their real problem is like, hey, that's what we do.
That's right.
That's what we do.
Yeah. Well, along that lines of sort of learning from what they're doing, it seems like this is the second crisis. We can, I don't know, you don't want to infer too much, but you can see a pattern with them if you deal with them firmly, as Trump has done. Now try. And so the question is, do they only do this in trade, or would they also behave this way in a political crisis or a military crisis over, say, Taiwan, or, for example, even trying to infer, God forbid, Chinese nuclear wargaming, which is they do something outrageous. And whether that's the trade stuff or potentially invading Taiwan or, let's say, nuclear war. And we escalate, and they have to match that the first time. But then we escalate again, and now for the second time, they've backed down. And so if you're sort of thinking of crisis stability, it seems like, for the reasons you pointed out, that they're so used to dealing with people like British Prime Minister Keir Starmer or Janet from Another Planet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, Fed Chairman under Biden, or, just name sort of anyone, or who's over the BlackRock guy, Tim Cook, once again, our wonderful patriotic CEO of Apple, who, we're supposed to be buying iPhones from Wisconsin, but it turns out they're all still coming from China. None of those guys get that, but I don't know. Do you think there is a pretty good pattern here?
I think basically you can always count on them. I wouldn't say they are Hamas, in that brutality and things like that, but evil's evil, and they're evil. We always think, okay, we can deal with them and things like that. I'll tell you a funny story. One time, I got insulted at a dinner table by a pro-Beijing newspaper. And it was a publisher's argument, we're at dinner, and a guy insulted me, and it was pretty nasty what he said to me. So I'm walking back, and I look at young Wai Hong, and I go, he's our publisher at Next Magazine. I go, Hong, I got that son of a bugger. I mean, I can't believe that guy said that to me. I almost wanted to get up and just go punch him in the face. And he looked at me and goes, Mark, you're a white guy. You don't have any face. He goes, it doesn't matter. You don't live in our world. And that's exactly what the change. It doesn't really matter who's the enemy on the outside. This is all about internal stuff. They won't show weakness. I'm convinced, like I said, they have to basically say, we have the last word, so they can look at their own people and say, we had the last word. Right. That's why I think Trump has figured that out. I'll give Trump that credit, and I think he can do it. We forget that in Osaka, he dressed down Liu Hui. He dressed him down when he thought he had a deal and he didn't, and he was giving him a hard time. And this is Trump, and I think the matter is, it's pretty brutal. It is not the Henry Kissinger school, but the fact of the matter is like it's pretty tough stuff. The irony is that John Bolton would do the same thing, but Bolton has ended up.
I know. Prosecution imminent. Now, would you have had more face if you had worn that Blades of Glory cardigan, or
well,
the same amount there? It's fall in suburban New York. I can tell.
It is.
Good.
Tell me about it. Boy, it's getting cold here.
Well, it's like without gun. You mentioned your Bond villain existence in Taiwan during the pandemic. You're in a secluded mansion.
People go, what was it like? You spent 80 days in solitary confinement. I said, if I'd have had girls in bikinis, I'd have been a Bond villain. I was at Jimmy's house up in the mountainside with my biggest problem was basically the Starbucks didn't open until 9 a.m. So I couldn't send the houseboy over to get my Starbucks until 9. You know what I'm saying?
That's brutal.
It was brutal. And then the pool was, I just
you had to skim your own pool.
Yeah, no, my time in It was the only problem is I actually did start to enjoy just being by myself. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't going the full Ted Kaczynski stuff, like coming up with that Unabomber. But once you're up there,
Develop your own currency or anything.
yeah, the problem is you hit day 14 and people are like going, "Oh, you can't wait to get out." I'm okay.
I know. Well, I always liked it because I knew you had no you had to answer the call. I knew you were there and had nothing else to do.
No, that's true.
Sticking with Asia, in Japan, Takaichi, who would be the first woman prime minister of Japan,
Yes.
the first woman leader in centuries. I mean, what other country has it? Of course, the United States hasn't. But even China was governed by a woman, not successfully, but I believe the last emperor of China actually sort of had a gray eminence who was, or at least before that, Boxer Revolution. Anyway, that's China. We're talking Japan. So, a woman who's likened herself to Margaret Thatcher and been likened by other people to that, who comes from the reform wing of the LDP, which basically always rules but has a minority coalition now, and is being challenged. So the Buddhist, pacifist, pro-China part of the LDP coalition has fallen away, so they're trying to bring in some right-wing parties, and as usual, I actually mean right-wing as a compliment here, always actually.
Yeah.
But anyway, Trump has made some mentions of support, but not by name, not said, listen, you guys, make her prime minister, do it now, save having to go back to the country to get a mandate, although there is a political argument for that. But basically, we have now someone who would be a reformist, continue this, it's not quite Thatcherite, but you have this trend in Japan of corporations sitting on mountains of cash to actually spend that money either on compensation or on R&D, something that will increase return on investment, return on equity over time, and actually make the economy there more productive, because actually they have fallen in just overall GDP and GDP per capita and income. Inflation was up, it's down a little bit. They can certainly slow down probably the rate of interest rate increases. So you have nascent reform. You have a government that's essentially doubled its defense spending over time. The plan has been going from 1% to 2% of GDP, but it's a big GDP, so we're talking lots of money. And I don't know. So am I getting the story right? And do you think Trump should just come out with unequivocal support for her, or no?
Trump is in Asia. My take on Trump is they basically don't hate him, they don't dislike him like the Europeans do, like half the European left does, but I don't think they listen to him. You know what I'm saying? So in other words, it's like, okay, well, who cares what he thinks? That would probably be the Japanese reaction. I do think that she is what is needed. I think that she brings instant stability to the region, and what I mean by that is I think the math for Taiwan changes, and that's a good thing. In other words, they're not completely dependent on the United States now as an ally, and it brings in it normalizes and drives deeper into the Japanese psyche, but also their bureaucracy and their defense industry, the self-defense forces, that we are going to fight for Taiwan. In other words, she almost states that out. I mean, it's my understanding of when you translate her directly, that's basically what she's saying. Is like, we're not going to let Taiwan go. As far as the economy goes, I think the real problem with Japan is they have not yet figured out how they're going to basically grow their country and manage the population and the workforces. It's the reason why immigration is a much more controversial issue than you think. She's very effective at going after these Muslim groups and these other people, that they don't want there. They'll get them out. But they still have a real problem, low births, a real issue with basically low growth rates. And they have this bizarre crisis in the sense that trying to get people to work longer is harder because they're wealthy now. So in other words, the idea that you can make somebody work another 2 years or another 4 years, that's all voluntary now. So the workforce is slowing. They need her to be there. She needs to break apart some regulation. She needs to open a few things up. But I really think the problem that they have in terms of their reinvestment and things like that is a human capital problem. and not a capital problem. I think there's a lot of money there. They just don't have the people to employ it. And they
Yeah.
don't know why you would employ it. In other words, you can only have so many robots. You can only build so many things. When you're losing, you're 126 million 3 years ago. Now you're 122 million. By 2027, you're going to be below 120 million. You're heading the wrong way. And she's got to find a way to reverse that, as does Taiwan and Korea, through migration and through friendly migration. But here's your problem now. The only place those people are really going to come from is China, because all the other Southeast Asian countries are just going other places. And
And just to interrupt, is that, I mean, someone, because I asked, why are there Chinese there if the Philippines is right next door and you have a bunch of people there who consistently want to work somewhere else? And someone said, oh, even just the characters of not knowing Japanese characters derived from Chinese is an issue that seems a little bit off to me, since Japanese
they
like
hate each
English,
other.
Filipinos do. You can use, your phone to
They,
translate now.
look, I'm going to have a T-shirt. I'm going to make a T-shirt up that's going to say, if we stop Asian hate, what else are we going to do? Because basically, these guys, the whole region, these guys hate these guys, those guys hate those guys. It's like if you go to India, an Indian friend of mine, he goes, oh yeah, get a guy from the north of India with a guy of the south of India. You know what I'm saying? They don't like each other. And it's the same, the Sheiks versus the Hindis and all this great stuff. It's the same in Asia. I don't know what's going to happen with moving the Filipinos around and moving the people around. The Filipinos actually can have a pretty decent life now if you go and I've just learned this the other day. If you're in the Philippines, if you're outside of Manila, now the call centers have some problems, but if you're outside of Manila and you're working in a call center, you're probably making about $600 US a year. So a month. So you're making close to $7,000 a year. That, if you go to Japan, you're going to have to really make that better. You're going to have to make about 22,000, 23,000, which is not impossible. But the fact of the matter is, does it really change your quality of life? In other words, the quality of life these people have is growing. And that's just at a call center. If you're a junior manager, if you have any engineering skills or computer skills, you're $10,000 a year plus in the Philippines. And so these wages are rising rapidly, the same in Vietnam. So it's not as easy to pull people out. I have a friend who's a recruiter for factories in Taiwan, and he said, look, he's actually dumped Taiwanese customers because they're these old, we're not paying them more than a nickel, you know what I'm saying? And we're going to have them sleep 7 to a room, And he's like looking at them going like, look, I can't get you anybody.
Right, right.
And
Well, yeah.
that's the way it's going.
Yeah, well, talk of this actually. Let's bring it home. And your mention of India is a great segue to the H-1B scam, I would call it, and our wonderful scammers at the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, talk about a bunch of irrelevant losers. I don't think they had too many friends in the Biden administration. I think Donald Trump still hates their guts, rightly so. I mean, a bunch of people who are just, longing for Mitt Romney to show up on a white night and export all what's left of our manufacturing and job base to overseas places. And I don't know what else keeps them up at night or excites them. But apparently H-1B visas, Trump, I think, caving to worthy political pressure, announced a $100,000 fee on H-1Bs. And that would actually cause the program to actually do what it's supposed to, that it's supposed to bring in people who are truly exceptional, where you really cannot, on a short-term, near-term basis, find the skills of the United States. I mean, I would actually just eliminate the whole program. But anyway, the Chamber of Commerce thinks that's unconstitutional or illegal or something. All visas come with fee schedules, so I don't know why this one would be different. But you've looked into this a lot. Can you talk a little bit about the politics and where it's going?
Well, look, there's two things going on. First of all, we have the AI revolution, which is real. In other words, it's taking jobs right now. We are seeing jobs being taken. And as long as that's going to happen, as long as that's going to continue to happen, we're going to be in a situation where what we're constantly looking at is pressure on recent graduates. And we've been having for years, we've been bringing in basically 100,000 H-1B visas since the 1990s. There's been a few ups and downs where they've knocked a number around, but basically that's it. Sure, we were absorbing these people. There's a lot of things, but now there's a contraction. It's been going on really since, I think in my mind, 2022, 2021, 2022. We're seeing these jobs shrink. Why are we still bringing in foreign labor? Why are we letting college kids stay here? This foreign labor, I have a real problem. I'm kind of unique in this sense. I just think these are indentured servants. We're bringing them up. That's not the American way. They don't have full rights. They're basically at the mercy of their employer. We would not tolerate anybody being treated like this in our country, yet we bring these people in. Second thing is the scam is, unfortunately, to their credit, the Indian community has figured out this is a way to get an immigration visa. We've had a few of these things pop up. So you've got the anti-immigration people coming at them. But the real issue is these H-1B visas are driving American students who get their STEM degrees. We said, go code, go code. Well, now they're not getting jobs because of AI or whatever. The easiest thing to do is to cut back on the H-1B visas. I'm not real thrilled about some of the racism involved around it, but it's a very simple fix. I think the Trump administration knows what they're doing, but there is a political wave coming that is going to be anti-immigration. You and I were talking about something else the other day. These ICE raids are having the exact opposite effect. People are fine with them knocking these people out. I think we'll reach a limit pretty soon where it'll be all right. Now they're going to start getting some other people. But right now, the ICE raids, they're still fairly busy. But the real thing with the H-1Bs is there's a political wave coming. I started seeing it this week, but I'd been on the Hill a little bit before. There are some draconian bills coming out of Republican offices just to eliminate the H-1Bs. Here's my thing. I don't know how you stop this. I think the Senate is where they'll try to do some things, but you're going to get outed very quickly if you stand in the way of this. What we've already seen happen, and it just started to happen a few weeks ago, is remember Elon Musk, I'll die on this hill, I'll die on this hill. Now okay, Elon Musk is saying like, you give me my H-1Bs. Amazon said, you give us big tech guys, our H-1Bs, everybody else can go away. I think that's going to be the compromise. I think what's going to happen is we're going to see this number of H-1Bs and OPTs drastically cut and also reduced in what it can be. The one thing that really upsets me is, all right, H-1B, electrical engineering, computer science, so that's fine. But why do we have H-1Bs for data analysis, our business analysis? Goldman Sachs and these other guys are really abusing this stuff. And I think they're going to start to look at it. But it's a scam. We're seeing a slowing job market. And I'm just telling you, I keep hearing this all the time from people. If you go to the college campuses, the students know about this issue now. And imagine you're a parent, as one did. Imagine you send your kid off to University of Michigan from New Jersey. It cost you $300,000. He comes out and he's like, oh, Mom, I can't get a job. Why? Well, this company here. And then they look over there and it's all these Indian guys who are running around, who are basically abused labor. I mean, that's what I just can't state that enough. I've met many of these individuals. They have to work 70 hours a week. They have to put up with shit from their bosses, their Indian bosses generally, or their foreign bosses. It is not a system that America really wants to be built on. And I'll say one final thing too. One of the things we're noticing about the tech bros, and I think it's going to come through, is we have a mass of immigrants in the tech bro world, and they have not been doing the things that would make America's long-term national security. They're very transactional. I think Steve Bannon always talks about it. They're always thinking about going to the moon. They really don't think of themselves as Americans. I'm always shocked when I go to San Francisco. They really think, well, I live in San Francisco and I travel all over the world. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, yeah, they should probably move somewhere there. No, you're
Well,
right. Lack of patriotism, but the politics of this, I think, are becoming increasingly clear, and that's why Trump took the steps he did. I mean, it's sort of the, well, can you keep the tech bros in and their money? And it's nice having at least some people in Silicon Valley who aren't rigging things, including, oh, I don't know, like Google News for the Democrats, and Google News is rigged for the Democrats,
yeah, yeah.
remains so. So, can you make them move a little, keep them in? Well, the votes are really against the H-1Bs and against the unrestricted immigration. And I think Trump took action in this, but this still is going to be an issue in the in 26 and then in the 28 contest
I
for
just have
Republican
one thing to
nomination.
say.
Maybe the Dems too.
The reason why I know it's an issue is I was back in DC and I was speaking with some of our friends. I'll tell you offline who they were. They go, oh, it's not a big deal. Most of our clients are happy. They kept saying most of our clients are okay. Everything's fine. I'm going like, your clients are not the ones who are showing up to these meetings, okay, and basically giving people an earful. Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think, is insane. But I was watching her the other day talk about it, and she had, I think, the American position. Look, all these guys who are over here working in landscaping crews and everything like that, we don't need to hustle. We've always had them. People are used to them. But then all of a sudden they look over at this neighborhood and all these guys from the Indian subcontinent, and it is racial, I admit it, are basically taking all these good jobs, and these kids from the University of Georgia or Georgia Tech can't get jobs. Or if they go into the job, 3 years later, they're removed because basically it's being outsourced by Cognizant. And so I think there's this. And the final part of this is one of the things that I think is very good that's going to start happening. I think the assimilation button in America was flipped off in the last 4 years, 5 years. And I think it happened very quickly. And that
Yeah, the
assimilation,
wokeistas didn't like that. Yeah.
they don't like it, but I think it's coming back on. I think assimilation is great. Look, I've never understood why people think they come. My father, we're from Syria. I'm not telling people Syria is like a society that's equal with the United States. I have no illusions on that. And I don't know when it happened that somebody from Pakistan or India or some other country is going like, oh yes, the US and we're right here with them. Really? You're gonna make and then then the wokeistas make us pretend that that's a real argument. But anyway.
Right. Yeah, no, that's right. No, pretending that all cultures are equal is one of their hallmarks. And if they really believe that, then I suggest they go spend some time in Somalia and Haiti, and then we can talk after that.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's all the time we have for our live edition. We'll be back again soon. Thank you, Mark Simon. Thanks for watching. See you again soon.
Okay.